Welcome to the halftime of the 1992 state championship game between the Thomas County Central Yellow Jackets and the Peach County Trojans. We appreciate you hanging with us as we've got a very special feature for you. Tim, during the years that you and I presented the radio broadcast of the Yellow Jacket football games, we compiled an all-time Yellow Jacket team with the help of the former coaches from Central and Thomas County Central High School that we feel is a fair representation of the best players this high school has ever had, position by position.
Well, we hope it is. It is somewhat subjective, and I'm sure that you have your own favorites out there, but we tried to give all the obvious choices and maybe pull a few from the past that you might not know about.
And we hope that this will motivate you to think about who your favorite players were from position by position through the years and who you feel like may be the best players as opposed to what we feel like and the former coaches.
True.
First off, we'll start with the quarterback position, and no better place to start than with number 10, Charlie Ward Jr.
He's simply the best. I mean, he's probably going to go down as the most famous player to ever played at Thomas County Central High School. I don't think there's any doubt about that. Of course, now playing at FSU, he could do it all. The total package, Charlie Ward Jr.
And of course, another quarterback that very similar to Charlie Ward Jr. in his size and style of play, Billy Joe Copeland from the early 70s.
From 70 to 72, and Billy Joe really was the Charlie Ward before Charlie Ward came along. He was tall, he could throw the ball, he had great athletic ability, and Billy Joe was the leader of some great teams back in the early 70s.
At the running back position, of course, we started off with one of the most famous names as far as offense in Central history is concerned, Terry White.
Terry White, the $1,000 man, is what Coach Cooley called him. He was simply an awesome athlete. He had great speed, great moves. He went through probably 100 tearaway jerseys in a year. In fact, he went through so many tearaway jerseys they had to stop buying them. He was costing the athletic department too much. But he was probably the best running back we've had.
And probably the best blend of size and speed that we've ever had wearing the Yellow Jacket uniform, Willie Robinson in the late 70s.
I had the opportunity to play with Willie, and Willie had, as you said, a great blend of speed and power. He was not a lot of moves. He'd rather run over you than run around you, but Willie was a great tailback. He really was. Very
similar to Willie Robinson in size and style, Steve Fleming during the Charlie Ward era.
Steve was a little more toward the power side. He had about 10, 15 more pounds than Willie did. Probably wasn't as fast as Willie, but Willie was probably the blend of Terry and Steve halfway in the middle, and then you go from the scat back to the power back. That was Steve Fleming. But
and another one that would run right over you.
Right, he enjoyed running over you.
In the backfield, we also have to mention a couple of honorable mentions from the 1992 state championship team. Maybe the best running back we've had pound for pound in Dondell Green.
There's no way you could have a team like this without putting Dondell on it. I think that much of him. He has the most heart of any running back that we may have had since the inception of the school. He's really an outstanding athlete and a good fella, too.
And another tough runner in the backfield, Billy Anderson from the late 60s.
Billy Anderson, you have to go way back. I'm sure a lot of people remember Billy. He was a good, tough fullback, and he's built like a fullback, as anybody who knows him will tell you.
We move to the offensive line at the tackle position, Dane Clark from the mid-70s.
Dane, I had the privilege of playing with him also. He graduated our freshman year. He was a senior, went on to play out at Arkansas for the Bison, the Harding Bison, and Dane was a great tackle.
The other tackle position, Big Scott Cooley.
Son of Wilroy Cooley, and Scott was a load. He was probably the biggest guy to play here as far as just height and weight. Certainly there was a couple more made weight a little more than he did.
He was 6'5", 300.
And he was every bit of it, too.
We moved to the guard position, and a fellow that didn't have a lot of size, but strength incarnate in George Herring.
Coach Cooley said there's no way you could make up a team without putting George Herring. He's the best guard. He was called the best guard that ever played here. We probably could have put him a starter at nose guard. He was that good as he played both ways.
George went on to become an Olympic weightlifter.
Sure did.
At about 175-pound weight division. The other guard position, Wayne Marshburn, big one from back in the Scott Cooley, Charlie Ward days.
I'm telling you what, with him and Scott Cooley on the same side of the field, you felt the field tilt just a little bit. But they were an awesome guard and tackle combo.
A couple of honorable mention guards we need to bring up. One of our friends from our era, Tim Van Zant.
Tim Van Zant's been called the best pulling guard we ever had. He really did a great job of getting out and leading the sweep. Then the other one, of course, was another friend of ours, Henry Walden, who was tragically killed in a car accident back in 1978. And Henry Puppy Walden was another great guard.
At the center position, another friend of ours, Joel Carter.
From our senior group, Joel was about 6'2" or 3", 210, 215 pounds, and an outstanding center, probably head and shoulders above all the centers we've had here at Central.
A veritable wild man, to say the least. An honorable mention at the center position, Scott Neesmith from the mid-'70s.
Coach Cooley called him the best center besides Joel, without a doubt. He said he was just did a yeoman's type job on the line.
We go to the tight end position, and another friend of yours and mine who was tragically killed in the same car accident as Henry Walden, Willie Hopkins.
Juicy. And Juicy was probably the best athlete, I would say, to ever come through Central. He played not only football but basketball. He ran track. He was about 6'4", 215 pounds, tragically killed before his senior year, and Coach Bowden wanted him real bad at Florida State.
Another honorable mention we need to bring up at the tight end position, Todd Williams.
Again, I had the privilege of playing with Todd. Todd went on to play at FAMU as a tight end, and he was an outstanding player and an outstanding person.
At the flanker position, how can you make an all-time Yellow Jacket team without Tommy Range, big 6'3", 240-pound speedster?
The Bull.
Yes.
Who got bus fare for carrying people down the sidelines with him.
At the other flanker position, we'll make an honorable mention here, Charles Anderson, who again played during our era at Central.
76 to 78, Charles went up to the University of Washington and played in a couple of Rose Bowls, and Charles was a great athlete, had real good hands.
At the split end position, Horace Smith, who went on to play his college ball at South Carolina.
Best receiver that Central has ever produced, in my opinion. Horace was the complete package for a wide receiver: speed, good size, and the stickiest fingers this side of Fred Biletnikoff.
And maybe one of the best set of hands on the other side of Horace Smith at the honorable position of split end, Ken Connor.
Ken Connor, of course, the son of Coach Eugene Connor, a longtime coach here, and Ken's gone on to Albany State and done an outstanding job, and another one that's not only a good athlete but a fine young man.
On the defensive side of the ball, we start things off with one of the most colorful players we've ever had here, Tyrone Jughead Samuels.
The Jug. There was nobody just like Jughead, and you can just ask that Worth County quarterback that he nearly decapitated up at Worth County.
Kowalski Lewis. He won't forget him, I promise you. Honorable mention defensive end Terry Wood, who played here in the early 70s.
Coach Cooley again said he was one of those kids that didn't have a lot of outstanding raw ability, but just had a lot of heart.
Another defensive end, one of the other total packages to come through this school, Jesse Small.
Hey, there's no way you could pick a team like this without putting Jesse on him. He's, gone on to the pros, played at Eastern Kentucky, and just, as you say, he could dominate a game defensively.
Another honorable mention at the defensive end position, Bernie Lanigan.
Bernie was Mr. Everything back in 1965. Captain of the football team, the basketball team, catcher on the baseball team, ran track. He did it all, and an outstanding athlete here in the mid-'60s.
Moving to the defensive tackle position, Tim, another member of this 1992 state championship team, Steve Glynn.
Steve just did an outstanding job this year. I don't know what more you could say about him other than it is high compliment to put him here on first team as a starter on this team.
The other defensive end or defensive tackle position, another teammate of yours, Gordon Roddenberry.
Gordon Roddenberry made the famous tackle of Johnny Chastain in 1979 for a safety to help us beat Thomasville 23-21. Gordon, of course, now in the coaching ranks.
We move to the nose guard position, and one of the most solidly built players to ever come through this program, a Hulk, to say the least, and R.C. Eason.
And here's another guy that could dominate a game. It literally would take two people to block him when he really wanted to play and when he wanted to get after people. R.C. went on to play at FAMU as a starter down there for 2 or 3 years, and just did an outstanding job.
Honorable mention at the nose guard position, Kenneth Fleming from the mid-'70s.
Kenneth is still around Thomasville, and of course he was involved in the great defensive stand against Thomasville back in '76. And Kenneth built just like a refrigerator, just like a nose guard.
And looks like he could suit up today and play.
Sure does.
We move on to linebackers, and my goodness, what a collection of linebackers we've had come through here. Starting with Cedric Small, back from the Charlie Ward, Scott Cooley era.
Cedric put together just like a Hulk. And when he hit you as hard as Jughead would.
And at the other linebacking position, our starter, Bobby Stewart.
A name from way back in the early 70s, played here from 70 to 72. Of course, Bobby, we have a trophy named in his honor. He was the first four-year starter that the school had ever produced. And, of course, he was tragically killed by cancer in 1973.
Another linebacking position filled with the gutsy Richie Roddenberry.
Richie, again, I hate that we have so many that are not still with us, but they're with us in our hearts. And Richie is another one who was tragically killed in a car accident, but he was part of those great teams. And I know you have a special memory about Richie.
Yeah, I don't know how many times on the radio you and I would say he was not going to be able to come back in the game after an injury. And after about 3 minutes or so, there he was back on the field. May have been the gutsiest player I've ever seen come through this program. We move on to the defensive backfield, and I will take anybody on with this defensive backfield, starting with probably the most talented athlete we may have ever had on the defensive side of the ball, and Robert Linton.
Robert Fuji Linton was the same grade and built much like Willie Hopkins. They were both tall and slender, and yet they were very strong. A good all-around athlete, as he not only played football but basketball also. And
dominated 1976 playoff game against Valdosta, in which Central defeated Valdosta and Buck Bellew 21-0.
I just asked Buck.
That's right. One of the other defensive back positions, Danny Copeland, who's now playing his professional ball with the Washington Redskins.
Danny was a freshman when we were seniors, and Danny has just done a great job. Again, another one of those Eastern Kentucky products.
Another defensive back, Myron Gaytan.
Myron, of course, the Gaytans have a long history of producing some great defensive backs, as we had one, Chris Gaytan, who was on this year's team.
And Myron, of course, playing his pro ball right now with the New York Giants. The other defensive back position filled by very talented athlete from a very talented defensive secondary, Joe Frank Burns.
Joe Frank was part of probably the greatest secondary that Central has ever produced. Back in '72, that team gave up 24 points. That defense gave up 24 points in 12 games, and the defensive backs had more interceptions than the other teams had total completions. That's an awesome statistic.
An honorable mention we need to bring up, probably one of the more celebrated defensive backs to come through this program. He played his ball at Florida State as far as college is concerned, is John White.
No doubt. John, another one in the Richie Roddenberry category of gutsy performers, had injury after injury and had a severe injury in Florida State. They thought he'd never come back, but he did. He has a lot of heart.
And we need to mention Roscoe Wells, who played with us during our days at Central.
Roscoe Wells, an outstanding free safety, was built much like Fuji Linton, and boy, could he hit.
Of course, we couldn't fill out our Yellow Jacket team without filling the kicking positions up. Special teams, very important, and probably the most consistent place kicker ever in our school's history would be Kevin James.
I don't think there's any doubt about it. Kevin James did a great job, was a kicker here for 3 years, and kicked a lot of memorable field goals.
Including that 1989 Thomasville game where they came in rated #1 undefeated, and Central pulled off a stunning 20-17 upset over the Dogs there at the Jackets' Nest. And in the punting position, even though Charlie Ward was a great punter, we have to go back to another great kicker, and David Light.
A member of our class, the class of '81. David did a great job. He always got a lot of good height, and I'm sure that if you kept the statistics, he would have the best net average of any punter who's ever played at Central.
Of course, you can come up with your own all-time Yellow Jacket team, but that's ours, and we appreciate you staying here with us to hear our feelings on the best player Central's ever had come through this program. Right now, we go back to the second half of the 1992 state championship game.